Welcome to Q&A practice. We'll start out with the plaintiff attorney. Ready? Here we go. From a two-dimensional standpoint, describe that for the jury, please. What Mr. Kratz is referring to as CAD is computer-aided drawing. In addition, we are doing all of our diagramming on the computer, and we refer to two-dimensional drawings. What that is in orthogonal view, meaning looking from the top straight down. That is how most of the Avery property was diagrammed, so that when you look at the computer drawing, it is as if you were way above that scene looking straight down at it. What that allows you to do is take specific locations and zoom in on it, if you will, to look at those locations in detail. Let's look at some of the two-dimensional drawings. What are we looking at now? By the way, Judge, as we go through this, I will refer to the hard copy. This will be the bottom of page 7, just so the record is clear as this witness testifies. Go ahead, Mr. Austin. We are looking at, here is that two-dimensional CAD drawing that was created showing the Avery property that we saw in the aerial photo, and again we have the ability to zoom in on specific areas if we wanted to see the details of a different location in that entire overall salvage property. Were you able, with your total station measuring, are you able to tell the jury the perimeter, if you will, in distances? Yes, not directly with the total station, Mr. Kratz. However, once we bring it into the computer environment, we can take measurements to be able to determine the extent of that. In this case here, I want to say the rough measurements because the property is not perfectly square, but north and south the measurement is approximately 1,260 feet, and east and west the measurement is approximately 1,300 feet. That comes out to be just under 40 acres. Alright, let's talk about some of the two-dimensional views that you created then. This image again, which would be on the bottom of page 8, is the entire Avery property. Is that correct? Yes, sir, and I will put this image back in here again to show you that we're going to zoom in, if you will, on certain sections on those two-dimensional diagrams. So with this portion of that drawing, we are now going to look at the two-dimensional drawing which shows the northeastern corner of the property. In that northeastern corner of the property are the business buildings, if you will, for the Avery salvage yard. What we are looking at here, sir, there are blue colored buildings down here, is the main business or main shop. There are also some other storage locations. This would be private residences located here. Were you also asked to do a two-dimensional view of where Teresa Hallbeck's vehicle was located? Yes, the scene we were just at was at the northeastern corner. We are now going to go down where you see a yellow box to the southeastern corner of that property. The very first night of forensic mapping, the Ray 4 was there, therefore we did forensically map its location and a two-dimensional diagram was generated, and we can zoom in on that area of the two-dimensional diagram to see that location. Then on the top of page 11 now, the screen that the jury is viewing, why don't you tell us what we are looking at? What we are looking at here are details of that southeastern corner of the property, and what we see here is the Ray 4 that Mr. Kratz has asked me about positioned here. Now, we did actually, using the total station, locate pieces of wood or other debris that was leaning up against or on top of the vehicle. That is why you see in this two-dimensional drawing there are some items on that view of the car. Were you asked to determine the location and the distance between the Ray 4 and a fixed object, which is known as a car crusher? Yes, to assist with that, I will put the aerial photo back on to again show that the Ray 4 was located down here in this location, and the vehicle crusher is located where you now see the yellow square. If you look at the CAD drawing of this, we can see where the vehicle crusher is related to the position of the ray 4. Now if I take a direct as the crow flies measurement, if you will, from the ray 4 straight across, and there is a pond area here, but straight across to the vehicle crusher is about 380 feet away. Again, for the jury, when you say about 380 feet away, you can actually tell them within a half inch how far away that is, can't you? If you were to ask me, Mr. Kratz, specific locations, say this spot on the ray 4 to this spot on the crusher, we could get very accurate. I rounded this off to the nearest foot just because I'm taking an approximate position on the ray 4 to an arbitrary position on the vehicle crusher. Were you also asked to do two-dimensional views of the area closer to Stephen Avery's residence itself? Yes, sir. Mr. Kratz, if we move from the vehicle crusher here to the northwestern area of the salvage yard, there are two private residences in that area, one belonging to Mr. Avery, and we can again on the two-dimensional drawings zoom in, if you will, on this location to view a scaled scenic representation of that area. On the top of page 14 then is our first two-dimensional view. Why don't you show us what you are looking at? Again, the northwestern portion of that property. What we are seeing here is a private residence. This would be Mr. Avery's residence. There is a garage next to it, and a little further east is another private residence and garage. I think you may have testified just in passing, but so the jury understands, were you personally involved in taking all of these measurements? Yes, sir. How many measurements did you take? For the Avery salvage property, there are over 4,100 measurements that were documented. How long were you there? How many days? It would be November 5th through the 12th, about a week. This slide, Mr. Kratz, shows that two-dimensional CAD drawing of the Avery salvage yard, and I have highlighted or labeled, if you will, these areas that we just saw details of. The location of the ray 4 in the southeastern corner of the vehicle crusher, the business office we saw first in the northeastern corner, and in the northwest this is Mr. Avery's residence. Were you asked to determine some distances for us? Yes, I was asked to determine some general distances. Again, as we saw earlier, these are point-to-point measurements. They do not account for the fact that we could not really walk from the business office to the ray 4. There are some obstructions in here, but if you took a direct measurement, you would see it's about almost 1,100 feet from the ray 4 to the business office. I will just move forward a couple of slides because the last slide, the slide on the bottom of page 16, shows all of those measurements. Why don't you go ahead, Mr. Austin, and tell us what all of those measurements are? Yes, sir. The other measurements I added on here, like the distance from the ray 4 to Mr. Avery's residence, again straight across the property, is approximately 1,480 feet. The distance back from Mr. Avery's residence to the business office is about 1,100 feet. For the final measurement, what I did is take the driving distance, if you would, if we were to go from Mr. Avery's residence, drive around and come around from the eastern portion of the property down to the ray 4 location, would be about 2,600 feet of distance. I have to add, Mr. Kratz, this doesn't account for changes in grade. In other words, the Avery property is not just a flat surface. There are some elevations in there. That doesn't account for traveling down a hill or traveling up a hill. So the actual distance might be slightly greater than 2,600 feet. How far is that in miles? Well, a mile is 5,280 feet, so this would be close to a half mile. Now, these two-dimensional views, the charts or the diagrams, if you will, have been used in trials, but are you able with this software, are you able with your training and experience to convert these measurements and to convert these two-dimensional images into more three-dimensional scenes or models? Yes, as I mentioned before, the total station actually records measurements in 3D space. That is not just our flat X and Y axis, but also a Z axis up and down, so we can come up with the elevations or the height of specific objects, which was done in this case using a different software package. That will conclude our Q&A practice.